So welcome to the Lava on Your Desk BoF. This was proposed to me by Neil, who unfortunately can't be here. And the idea, as far as I'm aware, came from LKFT interest in reproducing test jobs at the developer's desk, basically to find out what may have gone wrong with a Lava job. So I assume it's reproducing failing jobs. I mean, you could reproduce jobs that pass all the time, just to give you a good feeling, maybe. The aim is to get interested people together to talk about running Lava locally. By locally, I mean extremely locally. There are other sessions on local labs, but this is not about a lab. And it's a BoF. So I tried to put together a few possibly controversial assumptions for people to challenge and pitch in. And it kind of won't be the same without you. So please do sort of dive in. My own particular interest in this is sort of automating targets. So I have a few slides on that to kind of fill the vacuum. But as I said just as the last session was closing, feel free to either pitch in with stuff that you think is challenging my assumptions, or even completely take this whole thing in a new direction. So about this BoF, it's aimed at individual kernel engineers, subsystem maintainers, and other interested individuals. It's aimed at having a single device under test attached to your local development box, so you can triage results coming out of some test, and that you can rerun those tests with local modifications. And it's not particularly about having to cope with dozens or hundreds of devices. So to kick off, and maybe to get some feedback, I've put together a sort of list of assumptions. And the first one is that you are able to run Lava locally without a PhD, for example. That you're particularly looking at automating jobs where the device is already supported and it's known automatable. Ryan, I think at the start of the week, put up a long list of constraints on what makes a device automatable in Lava. And that you're trying to do something that's not broken for other reasons, like, as I found out, that you can have everything right except the firmware wrong, and then everything's wrong. And thanks to Maria for fixing me on that one. I'm assuming that, okay, you could just replicate the lab hardware, but that's not always affordable, desirable, available. You may not have the room or the budget, or it may not even be available worldwide. And also, when people talk about the lab, they talk about thousands of devices executing millions of jobs 24/7. And whereas this is just a very small scale, things can break, it's okay. If you are having to use hardware to automate a target, that it's something that you can get anywhere, and that you know what you're getting. And then another assumption is that HKG is a great example, because according to the Lava documentation, it's the most problematic board due to various reasons. And again, Maria's here, so she can attest to that. And that's from a section of the documentation called Lava Integration Stories, which I recommend to you as bedside fiction. So,
is that section relatively new? Because the last time I read the documentation, it said you're not smart enough to add a board on your own, so I thought, I'll go and use something else.
So yes, a few months ago we actually we know adding devices into Lava is hard, so we specifically started adding not so much examples of how to do it, because too many of these boards are different, but specifically stories from our engineers about how they integrated things to give some clues on the road, and also some I guess hard-fought experience on just how bad some boards can be.
So before I kind of go on any further, are there any other points anybody would kind of want to raise in those assumptions. We have had the forum and talking about installing Lava locally. I don't know if people want to tackle that in the BoF, because it is quite a significant topic.
Can we get a container or a VM instead?
That's a very good question that we can.
So I don't have to.
Hmm?
Because
So do you want to ask your question to Mike?
oh, yeah. Can we get a container or a VM instead?
That's not the same as the mic.
It's for the recording. For the third time, can we get a container or a VM instead?
Yeah. So you can find on GitHub 10 containers doing that. And recently, Sentinel just made an official one maintained by the Lava team. So yes, you can run Lava dispatcher on inside the container.
So does this container contain all the common configurations for all the boards that we have access to, generally speaking? So I don't have to futz around with any of the configuration.
So when it that's when it becomes tricky. So using QEMU will work out of the box. Having real hardware behind require a few configuration, accessing to a USB device, so you are able to flash the board and stuff like that outside of a container. I don't think it's well documented right now. It can be done, except it's not easy and trivial.
So the fact that you have the container now, does that mean that it's an official way of using Lava now? We can talk to the members and say this is how they should be doing things.
Yeah, as far as the Lava dispatcher container is concerned, like we can use it, but we don't have Lava server yet, which is containerized. But just for running dispatcher, it could be done. I mean, a containerized dispatcher could be attached to a production or any Lava server instance. I mean, the documentation part is the only thing which is missing, but I mean, it is like it is already there in the I mean Docker files, the containers Docker files, like how to like run this container with different modes and things like that. But I mean, we are just planning to like come up with a blog post which explains the different use cases and how to do that.
So now if we hear someone who wants to use Lava and tell us that they don't want or they cannot use Debian, we can say this is the solution. This is deal done. We can really say that. Okay, good.
It will be. Yeah.
Because that was actually one of my main concerns when preparing this BoF, because Neil had said to me, oh yeah, talk about the physically connecting devices, which I have some stuff on. So basically the contents of that box in Cambridge, which is the Lava graveyard, all of the people who've passed through and passed on. But actually get on the mailing list that there is just a sort of general drip of people trying to get Lava installed and up and running locally, and okay, maybe the container's the good way to go. So I was going to talk a little bit about connecting devices, because actually physically connecting the controlling the test device, whether or not you containerized or running native, is perhaps interesting. And maybe is this what you meant in terms of the configuration that needs to be done for the container? Is that you have to tell it how to talk to the devices? So it's basically obviously serial connection. Lava recommends certain apparently, Neil tells me. Power control, so putting the device in a known state and off is a reasonably well-defined state for most devices. And then other control, which for the difficult high key example is turning off the OTG port. We have even more esoteric control now for, you know, boards sprouting multiple relays for trying to do firmware updates. And that's maybe quite interesting. Okay, but in terms of the comment about configuring to talk to real hardware rather than QEMU, and obviously QEMU is great because you don't actually have to go through all the stuff of having to configure talking to a target, and it's still the recommended way to bring up a new instance of Lava, even though it's quite hard to persuade people to actually do that. Persuading people to write their first job on QEMU just doesn't really seem to work, in my experience. They just want to connect hardware and go. Okay, but these are the device dictionary entries that you need to put in for talking to a physical device, particularly something like a high key. And pre-power and pre-OS are the commands for turning the OTG on and off respectively. Because for those of you who are not familiar with high key, if you leave the OTG powered, then you can't use the USB ports. So does anyone have any particular good stories about getting targets running locally? Have people actually got targets running locally today on their desks with Lava installed locally? Locally, does that include, when you put your hand up, Dave, was that the lab?
No, I'll have to do that. Well, yeah, it's a really big desk.
That's right.
So I had full automation of the high key, so I know everything Dave was saying in the previous session about how lousy the reset sequences, but I was always too put off by the original PDU interfaces and things like that to actually integrate it into Lava, and I have yet to come back, but I do intend with V2 to come back.
Yeah, I would like just to add a side comment to that. Actually, this is not my use case, and my use case is writing test and developing test. So I'm not using hardware to do that through Lava. I just use my hardware when I work on the hardware. However, I use the Lava dispatcher in a container to write the test, because it's hard to understand what's behind the software, behind Lava, how your code, your test works. So just wanted to, it's not exactly that, but there's other use cases where you can use Lava on your desk just to do, writing the test.
So we mean with QEMU?
Yeah.
Thanks. So
I can just add to this. DUT control hardware, like of course, like the Lava, Cambridge lab recommends some of the PDUs and different things, but those are like for a production level setup. But if you want to have like one DUT or something like that, there are even like cheaper hardwares which is available. Like for example, in my lab I use something called a Ubiquiti like M-Power M5. That is a PDU. It has both Ethernet and also like Wi-Fi interface. So you can like control the PDU based on that, and also for the USB like hub kind of solution in order to power on and off a USB port, similar to like the Cambrionics hub which has been used in the lab. We have something called the YEP kit. So they produce a board called Wyquish. Like it has 3 ports, and that works very good for a high key USB control, stuff like that.
So it allows VBus control?
Pardon me?
Does it allow VBus control for USB?
Yes, yes.
okay, that's interesting, because this was the sort of avenue that I was interested to try to put into some of these slides. because I'm actually hoping that more people would be interested to get hardware working locally, because, okay, I'm a big fan of QEMU for writing tests, because you don't hang up hardware and it gives you quick results, and you don't have to do target integration. But I think for people who actually do want to have a few actual boards, you know, people maybe you're working on a particular device, I think it's interesting. As Senthil said, so there's the same hardware that's in the lab, which is so using Cambrionics USB hubs and what PDUs? APC still. So,
and we're working with Cambrionics at the moment. We might, well, it's going to be a few months down the road, but we're looking at having a 12-volt PDU that just supplies 12 volts. Yes, exactly. And hope, again, we're still negotiating on this. It will be SNMP controllable, so I can use exactly the same method of driving. So.
On the PDU,
have you seen the Acme board that Bay Libre did? It's basically a little daughter board that goes on a beagle bone, and it's got a bunch of power switches that you can put on it. So what they're doing is they just use a PC power supply, and you can put +12 or +5 depending on what you want, and it just controls the switch, and it actually does power measurement too.
How many lines?
I think it can do 8 on one board.
you can actually stack them up.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can put more, and they have PDU daemon support for it already.
Oh, right, okay.
And it reads energy consumption on the boards. So, saying that I learned about it last week, and I'm ordering a few.
I'll look at getting one in.
Okay, so Senthil mentioned YepKit, which is something that I use their stuff as well, and it's kind of we sort of got two ends of the spectrum here, because you've got things like the APCs and the Cambrionic stuff, which I call expensive hardware that's the same as hardware in the lab. It's known to work. Okay, it's definitely supported, and then you have well, relatively open designs. The YepKit stuff is pretty open. Right, I mean, you just get a little bare board and some tools to play with, and I also have some. I have some similar things which is kind of done with things that I think you have lying around, which I've got some demos for that. But between that, I mean, there's other sort of either branded consumer hardware. Maybe this is the hardware switch that you the PDU that you were mentioning, or there is a pro level hardware, which I guess unfortunately the lab can't really buy one of everything to try it out. And then, you know, as you go down the scale, I had the experience of buying a USB hub that supported per port switching, which was great. And then I ordered the same again, and I got the new model that didn't, even though it had the same part number and the same model number. So, you know, you're not quite sure what you're going to get. But you know, I don't know. It's quite interesting to categorize these things. I'm wondering if maybe it's worth having somewhere like I don't know, somewhere where people can store, or some people can upload stuff that works for them, to give a repo of, you know, maybe 12-volt PDUs or consumer parts that work, or stuff like that. I tried to sort of categorize things that you know, main switching products like the APCs, low voltage switching like a 12-volt PDU, homemade main switching solutions, which I didn't think was a particularly good idea. That is like, you know, rolling your own mains relays, danger of death, BADs, or even worse, equipment destruction. Is the trend still mainly main switching, or because you're going for a 12-volt PDU, are you moving to low voltage? Is that?
So this is all part of the large-scale deployment stuff. So the idea is that we would be able to put up to 16 CE format boards into one U and have switching within the case. But there was a sort of discussion about, well, if we can do that, maybe we could have a separate thing, which is the 12-volt switchable PDU. So.
Yeah, because I guess 12 to 16 wall warts is actually a bit ugly anyway to put somewhere. And then what is my last slide on hardware, which was this one, because obviously for the USB OTG switching, has anybody got sort of robust hacked USB cables for just putting relays in and switching them?
Yeah, I do that.
Do you?
Yeah, I just snip the power line and put it through a cheap relay.
Right.
We used to do that in the lab until we discovered the Cambrionics hubs.
Maybe you could kind of do an instructables or a kind of craft session. Kind of.
I'd point out that there are thousands of different types of PDUs out there, and Lava doesn't care as long as you can drive them from the command line.
Sure.
So,
I was going to say, I think cable breakage is one of the tricks for a domestic lab, because it works on power supplies as well. Because the belief that a relay is a PDU only works if you can cable it up, and since you already have a power supply with a cable in it, if you try and buy lots of connectors, you take months before you finish wiring up the harness. So I break out the centre core of a power supply and put it on connectors so that I can use it normally if I need to, and then I break it and run that through a relay. And I have a USB stick that runs a single relay, and I have slightly wider relays in my garage.
So I just learned this week that Bjorn has this open design that they did it at Sony, which basically acts as a USB breakout. So you have a USB going in and another USB cable going out, which you can then switch over a relay. I don't know if we still are into board manufacturing, but it might be an interesting thing to see.
Yeah, I've seen that design is something that, if you want to buy 50 or 100 of them, they'll make them. Someone will make them for you. The design.
Yeah. So I don't know if there is enough interest.
Let's get them as the next conference present. Instead of a Type-C converter that I've got two of, I would have a small board with a couple of breakouts. So the cheap hacks that can do that would be a big deal, because doing it on your own is tedious, and getting 200 for conference attendees is dead cheap.
Yeah, we just need to get a link to the designs and see if we can get those for cheap.
Actually, well, we could probably get. I don't know if we could get YepKit to do something as a conference giveaway that would actually allow everybody who came there to be able to automate a device in Lava. That would be an awesome giveaway, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's I've got, because I'm based in Cambridge. Is that an action that I've got from this?
It's why I said it in front of you. Yeah.
Damn, this is on. I'll go again. This is on video. Right. Okay. The one cool thing that before everybody else, please pitch in and take over. One thing that I found when I was looking at possible solutions for USB control was that you can switch the USB power on both the BeagleBone and on the Raspberry Pi. So you can actually turn on and off a connection to a connected device on the Raspberry Pi or BeagleBone. And then you can replicate the USB connection over USB IP and have that working. So obviously you can get Raspberry Pis and BeagleBones everywhere in the world. And so you have a USB switching thing. And then you can also get a cape or a hat, either with relays or with a motor control hat, and you can use the transistors to switch the supply, and you can have a single worldwide sourceable board switch. I've got a demo of that for tomorrow. So yeah, maybe switchable standard root hubs is another interesting way to go, rather than necessarily buying other hardware. And as I say, it's a BoF, so Let me give this mic to.
Yeah, where's my microphone?
Bill, there's a lot of, you go to like Adafruit or something and you buy a package with like an Arduino board and LCDs and breadboard and cables and all that. It'll be nice if we talk to some of those and then come up with a package for automating lava. So you buy the whole thing all in one place.
So at my when I was working at Sony, we had exactly this problem of how to automate flashing and restarting of phones. So one of my colleagues, he developed something that's called CDB Assist. You can ask Google and you will find the picture, the schematics and everything. It has two micro USB and one whatever the USB out is. So one of the USBs you get control over VBus toggling, and we had a power supply driving two banana connectors out of that, and you get UART and this control interface and a couple of GPIOs, and then the other USB was just passed through. And I talked to Lawrence King about taking that GPL design and squash it into a mezzanine instead, and I think that would be the way to go, because a lot of the other alternatives ends up being some sort of wire harness where, in particular, if you try to trust that, there's going to be a lot of external errors or faults.
But that would be only for 96 volts.
Yes, that would be for 96 ports, but yeah, I think the schematics and Gerber and all of that is available.
Because it would be cool because with a simple USB breakout, then you could do that and you could have a mezzanine. Would that be so bad if it was only 96 volts?
No, I'm just saying. I mean, we have bigger loads than we get.
So if you're going to do a mezzanine, then you can remember that the mezzanine has 12 volt inputs, so you can put the electricity right there from the mezzanine.
Yeah, and the chip used to control this thing was a PSOC, so you could implement an I2C dummy slave and things like that to get additional test functionality right out of the low-speed connector.
You can have a wire-free connection to USB through the high-speed connector as well, so it ends up very elegant. Although then you can't test you'd have to have a backup connector, because otherwise you won't be able to test enterprise boards.
Yeah, and the question is if the bootloaders will listen to that thing for example, fast boot support. Or,
yes.
I have a possibly controversial opinion, which I think you should all enjoy. My opinion is we've all been talking about power control and things like that. They're all great ideas for people at home maybe who want to run their little labs, maybe 5 or 6 devices or something like that. The guy on his desk, one device, he wants to maybe put a kernel on it, run some K-self tests, look at a failure, build his own kernel, put another one. Why does he need lava to do that?
He doesn't. He doesn't want it to iterate a kernel. However, as soon as you have within your team some set of lava test cases, or you're developing lava test cases, having something like the lava dispatcher to give it a test suite and just run that on my board, that's a quite convenient thing.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good.
But for the scheduler and things like that would just come in your way.
Yeah, I was just thinking of you get a bug report, this one K-self test has failed. It's probably easier for you to build your own kernel, quickly flash it on the device, run K-self test and see if it now passes, rather than have to go through the making it all work in lava.
Correct.
Good. Good. Was it as controversial as I thought?
Depends if it's the last thing that we have.
Yeah. In conclusion, don't bother.
Can I just borrow the show, this was presented last week
Sure.
by the
Yeah,
base.
Do you want a microphone?
Sure. This isn't my presentation, so. But,
Is this ALC?
yeah, this was at ELC.
In a box, yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, so this is what the Bay Libre guys were presenting last week. And so what they did is they just took a ATX box and they put a little PC here that runs Lava in the dispatcher. Here's the Acme board that I said that does the power control, power supply, and then they have a bunch of, on the drive bays, they put a bunch of devices that are controlled. And I think they said they were going to put all the details on how to set this up, and from what I recall, they're doing this for AGL, for automotive grade Linux people, so that people can set it up at home and use it.
I noticed they didn't do a high key though, which is the hard one, right?
Yeah, you know, that'd be 3.5 inches.
It might not necessarily be the hard one anymore, because there's so many use cases to ask help for.
You need to say that into the mic.
I'm saying that the high key might not be the hard one anymore, because there's a lot of people to ask how to do it more correctly. Not necessarily right, but more correctly.
That's wrong.
That's wrong, yes.
I am going to say that actually high key is definitely the hard one, and it continues to be the hard one, at least until 2 p.m. tomorrow, when you've all been impressed with my demo of 3 automated high keys.
3 automated circuit code high keys.
That's right, old school.
How long did that take to set up though?
I'm embarrassed to say it was quite hard, but actually the high keys, no high keys were harmed in the making of this, and any problems of flakiness were actually not high keys.
And you did the high difficulty level, because these are the green boards.
Yeah, circuit code.
Yeah, these are the only boards they let me have these days.
Did you cheat by using U-boot?
Did you use Pete's U-boot port to make it easier? No, you didn't cheat, because that's how Kevin had the high keys in his non-lava lab. Was they were all based on U-boot as the primary bootloader, because that was easier for him to automate.
No, these are running the same firmware as the lab, and they're actually running standard lab jobs.
So one of the things that was last Connect, when we met and discussed Lava, one of the biggest concerns I had was the ability to run test cases where storage isn't reliable, or where we can't rely on having Ethernet because we don't rely on having USB. And there has been really good progress, so I think we're out of the woods there.
You want to say why?
Why? Because we fixed it.
Yeah, maybe it's people wrong. Maybe we should say.
Then you can say why.
Go on, Nico.
Which part was but there was a collaboration between the Lava team and our team, or in particular Annibal, and yeah, we squashed a number of different issues there. So.
Yeah, so there was enough improvement done in how we, what we can do in the, I mean, I don't know all this stuff, but in the LXCs and in the test jobs that we define. So we are up to the point where we can now have a CI loop that monitors and waits for binaries to show up on kernel.ci.org, and we take the binaries from ci.org, which we bundle with some of our initramfs. That includes some of the tests that we need. So I mean, we have a complete CI loop every time there is a new build, and we run out of the initramfs, so without any storage or without anything. And there were a couple of enhancements along the line to do that. I mean, you guys know, I mean, on the lava side. So all that stuff now works, I mean, as of today on the main instance of lava. So it's available for anyone to use. And it was not straightforward 6 months ago, and actually it was not even possible 6 months ago. So just to come back to your previous, the mezzanine idea, I mean, you say that and everybody heard that. I mean, are we taking, I mean, is anyone, I mean, are we going to do anything with it, or is it just like someone said something and we are not going to do anything with it? It's the mezzanine that Bjorn mentioned, the Sony thing.
Built with the action item.
No, that was not this one.
Well,
that was about
the other one. Well, the 96 board was going to be much easier to sell.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah,
so we are going all to get a mezzanine and X Connect.
Anmar's taking and assigning the action, unfortunately to me.
I've done it that mentally already.
You're
sent it to you
in
mentally.
with me, buddy, on this
Sure.
one.
Actually, I have skin in that game, so yeah, I have no choice.
That's why we didn't see it, but we are very happy to hear that.
Any other points?
Is there a REST API for Lava?
Is there a REST API for Lava, or still XML RPC? Are there any plans for a REST API? No.
Why you want REST?
No, it's just with using REST on Squad, we wanted to use REST somewhere else. That's all. Just curious if it's something coming down the pipe or not.
Right now, no, because it takes some time to do it and it's not private.
Okay, good to know.
We need that on record, yes.
For the recording, yes. So it's not planned because it does take time and we have over priority to tackle first.
Anything else?
I think REST API is important. We need also REST API for automating the script to fetch the data from Lava. Yeah. I think REST API should be supported.
You should be able to use the XML stuff.
We do have an XML RPC API.
It's like a Google's Garage, we use the Google's REST API to fetch data from Garage. Our local Garage, not Google's. Because we want to, in the CI, we want to automatically use the script to fetch the Google's change list, the Garage change list, and to get statics data.
And you can't use XML RPC for that. It's an API, it's just another method.
Actually, you SSH to call the REST API. Use the Python script to import some library to communicate with Garage using REST API.
So you will be able to use the XML RPC API.
Yeah, just the JSON format to get the JSON data. Yeah.
JSON is different kinds of output for different methods, but it's basically you can do it with items with XML RPC.
Yeah.
The output is not just XML. It can be JSON as well.
Yeah, just JSON because Python parse JSON is very convenient.
Yeah.
There is a XML RPC library in Python. That's the one you were using. So when you from Python you import the right module, you do XML RPC call and you get a dictionary or a Python pure object. So you do whatever you want with it. If you want to then dump it as a JSON YAML or whatever you can. It's a Python object then. It's XML RPC. It's a remote call, so you're just calling a Python function from your side. From a point of view, just calling a function. Then you get a Python object as an answer, and you can treat it as you want.
Do you have example on the documentation?
Yes.
Can you send it to him?
Okay, I take picture in the presentation. I got the link for doc, Lava's doc link. Yeah. So I can search in the doc.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So in fact, if you need any help for that kind of thing, you know, if you can't find it in the docs, please ask on the Lava users mailing list. We're happy to help with that kind of thing.
Steve, you have an IRC channel as well, right?
There is a Lava IRC channel as well.
Hashtag.
Yes, there is. On Freenode. Yes.
And you can use the Linaro support as well. I mean, I see that you are a member, so you can also use the Linaro support.
Yeah.
Support at linaro.org, and you also get the answer. Yeah.
Or you can just ask your technical liaison engineer to
Just now you need the documentation.
Here's a list of yeah. Just ask a random Linaro person and they'll sort it out. It's fine.
Grab the first guy.
Okay, any other points? We did this one to death. Okay. Thank you very much.